Hello, this is Kevin Benedict, Senior Analyst for Digital Transformation at Cognizant. I'm reporting live this week from London, England. Hello, I'm Kevin Benedict, Senior Analyst for Digital Transformation here at Cognizant. Today, I'm reporting live in London, England here, and I have the privilege of speaking with one of my colleagues, Ved Sen, who is our mobile guru here out of the UK office and across continental Europe.
That's very generous.
Thanks for joining us, Ved.
Pleasure.
So why don't you talk to us about, let's start out just talking and sharing with the audience here, and let me have you move this way just a little bit. Let's talk about trends. What are you hearing in the marketplace now? Or, what are you hearing around platforms and maybe what's different in the people's approach to mobile platforms this year over last year? And even from a SDK, a software development strategy, what are people doing different this year? Let's start with platforms.
Okay, so two big things that I would call out is, first of all, that, historically in the European market, we've not seen a lot of B2E application development.
Business to employee.
Business to employee.
Okay.
Most of the expenditure on mobile has been externally oriented, business to business to consumer. And because of that, there's normally one big app that companies like to put out. In that environment, there is less of an appetite for an enterprise middleware kind of product because people are trying to hand roll and handcraft and fine-tune that one application.
So is that kind of the digital version of a retail store for them?
It could be a retail store, it could be the brand application, it could be a service application.
Okay.
You may be a utility company, and this is the one application that your consumer uses to track their energy, for example.
Rather than coming into a physical office, here's a digital intermediary, if you would.
Absolutely.
They can come to the mobile app, they can self-service, they can do what they need.
All of that.
There,
yes.
Got it, okay.
But in that world again, because it's one single application, people prefer to build it in a more custom manner using Android, Apple, technologies, rather than use a cross-platform tool.
Based upon their back-end systems, their unique business processes, all that fun stuff.
And they would then build the application natively, so to say.
Okay.
I think what we're seeing in 2014 is a slightly higher level of, interest in business to employee applications, and so suddenly we're getting back into this conversation which talk about, how do we roll out a bunch of applications for our employees? How do we then build this enterprise mobility strategy that will serve that kind of need?
So Ved, when people do that, when they're looking at that B2E kind of solution, what are they really trying to accomplish from an ROI perspective?
I think fundamentally the ROI question is a tricky one for a number of different business areas. Where it does come very clean is in sales. If I can make my sales team more effective, that ROI calculation is often the easiest one. The sales guys are the most mobile, so they're the most in need of the application, and any change I make to a sales guy's effectiveness is going to come back to me in dollars or pounds immediately.
So that probably translates not only to sales, but also services and delivery.
Absolutely.
Anytime you have a significant workforce outside the four walls.
Absolutely. But therefore, if you've just taken the words out of my mouth, if you look at the sales force and the field force, all your service engineers, these are broadly the two sets of people in your organization who are already mobile. They're the ones most likely to benefit upfront from a mobile application. And so your return on investment is highest for that kind of group. To that extent, what we are trying to do is we're trying to build out both these stories, and we have a transformation approach to sales. So a lot of our clients we are working with to say we can enable your sales team, step one, and then we can help to transform that process. How can we make it better? How can we make a sales guy do something very different that would give a real dramatic improvement in the sales efficiency or effectiveness?
I was talking to a Forrester analyst here earlier this year, matter of fact, in this very office, and he said this is the year of complex mobile applications. What he meant by it is he said this is the year when companies move beyond the proof of concept and into how can we beat competition with a more clever use of mobile applications.
Absolutely, and you can easily see that most companies have large complex systems. So if I give my sales guy a mobile application, I'm not just trying to put a shiny interface on a CRM system. I also want that person to be able to connect to other systems, such as my pricing, which might come from an SAP environment. I might have collateral which might come from a content repository. What I want though is a single application on an iPad, which when I walk into a client's office, that's all I need. And that one application has the intelligence and the context sensitivity to pull out information from whichever system it needs to in my backend, so that that salesperson, he or she, can serve the customer in the best possible manner, in the most effective way. That includes, big data elements. It includes the social feeds. It could be a great conversation starter if I've been tracking the Twitter feed of the person I'm trying to meet, because then I have an insight into that person's interest and areas of enthusiasm.
Absolutely. And I see speed as kind of the underlying motivation for so many of these applications to speed up access to back-end information, speed up access to data collection,
Yep.
speed up access to so much.
Absolutely.
Which if you're able to accomplish kind of the day-to-day task at a much faster rate, then of course you're also able to be more efficient.
Yeah, we've always spoken about real time as this kind of almost mythical concept that we're all trying to get to, fantasy land, but now it's actually becoming reality. We can actually be real time in so many more aspects of our business. I can get information to a salesperson when he's at the client location.
Hello, Ved. So you focus on the services side of mobility. Talk to me about how much work does mobility require from back-end systems? Do you go in there talking mobile applications, and then when you start to look at how to support the mobile applications, you find that back-end legacy systems are actually going to require work themselves in order to support the kind of real-time mobile environment?
There's never an easy answer to that one, but certainly the backend is a real consideration when you are trying to deliver a real world mobile application that's actually impacting the business. So very often what happens is that the backend system has some kind of combination of legacy environments as well as reasonably easy to use more modern systems. And that's where I think the architecture of mobile applications has changed a lot over the last 6 to 12 months. Whereas earlier we would have the kind of heavy duty mobile middleware systems that you would buy as an enterprise, a big piece of software.
Mm-hmm.
I think we've moved now to this much more lightweight and agile, and I say agile with a small a, environment, where you put in an API management, or what we call an MBAS, which is a mobile backend as a service kind of layer, which just exposes information. It doesn't matter. It doesn't care if it's a legacy system or off-the-shelf product or something homegrown. As long as we can access the information and we can then make it available to the front end, which could be a mobile application, could also be a website. I think that kind of more nimble architecture is what we're seeing a lot of. And if we can implement that, then it sort of protects us to an extent against having to do a lot of work in the back end. But I would also call out that the real work is not so much in the traditional applications and fixing the apps or the business logic at the back end. It's more massaging data. It's understanding how the data structure should be. It's understanding what's the latency you can live with. How quickly can you get data to the mobile device? Because on a mobile device, even 5 seconds isn't going to cut it for the user.
Right. I always think in terms of that turn-by-turn navigation.
Yep.
You don't want to pass the exit and 5 seconds later say you should have turned.
Absolutely. So and you can extend that analogy in a number of ways, right? Because it's not just the delay itself can impact the outcome in this case, but sometimes you don't know if you've missed it or not. In a business scenario, you're waiting for something to happen, and you don't know if it's gone through, if there's a problem, or it's simply a system lag. So I think we're in a world where on the mobile device users expect pretty much instantaneous response. So that's where your architecture and backend need to come to the party with something that gives you that kind of response. And your job as a mobile application development provider or partner is to make sure that end-to-end that kind of response is assured.
So I'm going to put you out on a limb here and ask you, do you see a fundamental shift in the way mobile middleware is handled? You said away from that heavy mobile platform kind of mentality, where one big heavy duty platform will do everything, to MBAS, as you brought up, mobile backend as a service.
Absolutely.
Do you see that as a fundamental shift?
I may well be eating my words in another 6 months, but certainly at this point of time, all indications are that we are moving to a much more lightweight mobile backend as a service or an API management layer pretty much every company we speak to is building or has already built an API strategy that is consumed not just by its own applications and websites, but sometimes partner applications and websites. So if you're a large logistics company that employs a lot of partners in a hub and spoke environment for delivering goods and services, you may well create an API layer that exposes the data to your third-party partners who can then pick up the data and build their own apps on top of that. So we're seeing a lot of that, and yes, to your answer to your question, absolutely, we see the shift in the mobile architectures to a more of an MBAS API management.
And you know that I see that actually taking place within the vendor community too.
Absolutely.
It seems like you're seeing the rise of MBAS and some of the market shift to some of the traditional mobile platform vendors.
And you can see that in the amount of M&A activity that is already taking place and continues to take place in what is really a very nascent environment. I mean, it's really, it's been a year and a half, couple of years since a lot of these players have been around, and already they're getting bought and sold, and you can see that traditional meat vendors, so to say, are already getting into the API management layer through acquisitions or sometimes their own development.
Absolutely. So we talked about platforms. Let's talk about software development.
Yep.
How are you seeing software development kind of mature and evolve over the course of the past 18 months?
I think one of the simple answers there certainly is we're building less things from scratch.
Okay.
Because I think the days of saying, okay, we've got to build, this application, we've got to start building everything from ground up is going away. Increasingly, you can get components that are available in the open source environment if you're in that world. But we ourselves have started to build and put a lot more effort into the creation of repositories of reusable components. Now, this is one of those things that's always been around in the industry. Everybody talks about reusability and no one's actually seen it work. And what we've done is we've taken the step of actually creating a truly reusable repository where each component that you put in has a very well-crafted definition of interfaces, of functions, so that if you've built this piece of code, I don't need you to be able to come and help me use it, even if you're not available. If you've defined it well enough, somebody else can come along and use that component. And we increasingly make commitments to our clients that as a part of a solution or a program of work, we will commit to a client to create a certain number of reusable components that they can sign off on and use as a part of the solution. So it's not even that we are holding on to these components ourselves. The clients themselves can pick up and use these components.
So some percentage of that code is able to be reused over and over again with all mobile apps.
I mean,
single sign-on,
exactly.
security, all those kind of things.
Map access, access to augmented reality tools. All of these should be built once, and then as far as possible reused with very little change.
So we talked about platforms. We talked about changes in the software development environment. Now let's talk about security.
Yep.
How are you seeing mobile security evolve as well right now?
So we've always had this argument that at Cognizant certainly that while there has been justifiably and historically a lot of focus on the device, the real need for security is not on the device. That's a part of the story, but it's really your data and your application that you want to secure. Very often we see data move from a device to an application into the cloud, back into a legacy environment and then back into a device, and there's no point just securing the device and thinking that secures your data. So we've taken an approach that is slightly more application centric. We've built our effectively what is an application security layer, an application management layer, which we call TrueMobi, which does that job and works on top of the device layer. And we are increasingly seeing a massive amount of uptake of that thinking. And companies are basically signing up to say, yes, we don't want to worry about the device, because increasingly we are getting into the world of unmanaged devices. We like to call it bring your own device, but also I recently was with a client in Europe, and they have a problem with the word bring your own device, because sometimes legally you cannot make the assertion that this device that is your personal device is intrinsic to your doing your job effectively, because if that's the case, then as a company I need to be providing you the device. So I think we sometimes have to rethink some of the phrases that we become very used to. So BYOD as a phrase has become something we understand in the industry, but it may have some legal connotations, but that's an aside.
So let me just add to that then. You talk a lot, because you and I have worked on many different projects and many different conferences. We talk about the idea of lifecycle management.
Absolutely.
Talk to me about that in the context of security as well.
Sure. I'll cover two concepts. One is on the so-called bring your own device, or what some of our clients are calling unmanaged devices. I think the story there is, first of all, that's not a technology activity alone. It's a business change. We think that there is a significant amount of work to be done in business processes, roles, new liabilities, policies, education, and it's not as simple as someone saying, okay, I've got my own device and I can just start using the same applications. Because I don't think people necessarily realize on either side of the fence, either from the employer or the employee side, what are the new liabilities, what are the new commitments that we are making as a part of this, bring my own device kind of scenario. So we're taking a much larger change management approach, which I think is again something we are getting a lot of resonance with our clients. We also have to recognize this is not a 0-1. It's not that everybody has to be a bring your own device candidate. It could well be that you break your organization into tiers, and top tier senior management get a device, the middle tier get to choose a device, and the bottom tier are the people for whom we can't afford a device, but they're welcome to bring their own devices.
Right.
A great example of this is on a shop floor environment in a retail company, for example, where typically these are people who you would not give a desktop to, but what does a shop assistant do when he or she sees a problem? Probably waits till the end of the day when they can get to a desktop or remembers to tell somebody. But if you could enable that set of people with a bring your own device or unmanaged device model, then you could actually bring another 20% of people into your IT environment who are currently not included at all. So that's not an instead of, it's an addition to your existing technology.
And you may be doing that not just because you're a nice guy, but because there's
this makes business
potential
sense.
value there.
Absolutely. It goes back to the real-time nature. If I see a problem with a customer in a retail store, I could make a, if it might be a broken shelf or a stocking issue, I could check it now, I could report it now, I could make sure that the data goes into the right system within seconds of my noticing it, rather than 12 hours later, which is typically what could happen at the end of the day.
Very good. Ved, I want to thank you so much for sharing with all of us your insight, what you're seeing on the front lines of mobility, what you're hearing from customers, how you're seeing the market evolve. Thank you very much. This is Kevin Benedict reporting live this week from London.
Thank you.